This episode has been brought to you by the Raw Raw Spirit Team. We teach small and medium sized businesses strategies for building a profitable, successful, stress free business and life. Because guess what? You are more than your business. Through one-on-one training, online courses, and monthly guest experts, the Spirit Team is built on the principle of building each other up in business and in spirit. Try it for 14 days for free. Just head to rawrawconsulting.com and check out the Raw Raw Spirit Team. Hey, it's Lauren here from the Raw Raw podcast. Coming up on the episode today, I spoke with Megan Sarmardin and we talked about all things creative. In fact, we actually kicked off the episode talking a lot about the importance of music and we name dropped some of our favorites. I need to tell you that I got on like a house on fire with Megan right away and I was so, just connected to her through her love of music and my love of music as well. And I really needed to actually redirect the conversation at a certain point because I could have talked to her for hours just about music and different artists and songwriting and lyrics and things like that. I love how Megan really opened up her heart in this conversation. She shared valuable tools for you to get creative, and she shared some of her, some songs that made a big difference in her life, and she shared stories around that as well. She also had some surprise mentions, which I wasn't expecting, which made me very impressed. So it's all happening for you now. Enjoy the episode. My guest today is Megan Sarmardin. As a singer, songwriter, and actress, Megan's experience lies in stage performance, composition for theater, solo and collaborative songwriting, musical arrangement for bands, creative mentorship, and community arts and engagement. Alongside Megan's career as a musician, she also works as a creative life coach, and I've asked her to join me today to talk about creative coaching and the power of music. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you today.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you.
So I promise I won't make you sing for me yet, but maybe before we get started about your creative coaching and the power of creativity, you could tell me a little bit about yourself and sort of where your creative or your musical journey began.
So I'm originally from Mount Isa, which is a little remote mining town in northwest Queensland. I was born there. I grew up there. My mum and dad are still there. My musical career, I guess, started in the lounge room at my parents' house because I was just exposed to different genres of music. It was what my mum and dad were listening to, what they grew up on. They took me to concerts when I was little. My dad played guitar, so he comes from a very musical family. And I was always around music, around people that loved music. We were always talking about it. And I remember really clearly just wanting to be a singer when I was little. And I've never kind of wavered from that. And I've never had anyone try and stop me or try and say otherwise. Like my parents were just, okay, that's what you want to do, singing, musical theatre, go and do it. Yeah. So I was really lucky to have that behind me.
Yeah, I think that, people who grew up in homes, because I did as well. My parents, they're not really musicians. Like my mom's a singer, but, I grew up in a house much like you, just full of music and that kind of, a lot of influences. And I feel sometimes that, I hope that I'm not offending anyone, but there's almost people who grew up in homes with music and then people who grew up in homes with TV. And there seems to be, I noticed some, at least in my experience, there's sort of that distinction. And I feel that, when you love music to the core of your being, it's just this unspoken language, really, when you can feel that.
It's really hard to describe the love I have for it and the feeling that I have for it to other people that aren't musicians. Like it's what you said, it's the core of your being. It's breathing, it's the way you live, the way you carry yourself, like all the different genres I listen to and all songs that are special to me. Like there's so much meaning behind it. And I can't describe the feeling. I don't know how to explain it, but it's more than a passion, I think. It's just life.
Yeah. So who
Yeah.
are, some of your musical inspirations?
Growing up in an Indigenous family, a lot of country and Western music, very heavily influenced by country and Western. I'm talking about old school country and Western because I started learning to sing in a country music club in Mount Isa. It was called the Spinifex Country Music Club. And it was like once a fortnight, everyone would get together, play their songs, and have their social dances. So I learnt to do like Gypsy Tap, Pride of Erin, all of those kinds of things. And love Dolly Parton, love Slim Dusty. I love, Mel Haggard. I love Buck Owens. I love Charlie Pride. I saw Charlie Pride in concert in Mount Isa when I was 6 years old. So these are the kinds of things that my mum and dad took me to because they just knew I loved music. And as I got older, I started sort of listening to things like, AM radio. And it's very old school because there used to be like a 70s, 80s hour. So it was just, Led Zeppelin. It was the Rolling Stones. It was the Beatles. It was a lot of things, like all the stuff that my mum and dad listened to as well, as I mentioned before. And then, you get teenage years. So it's, Garth Brooks was a really big influence in teenage years. Then I have the Backstreet Boys, which is like...
Oh, you had me at the Backstreet Boys. I always knew we were kindred spirits.
Whole opposite. Like it is just, Keith Urban. And then when I was sort of, at early adulthood, it was, what was on at the discos at the time, when you get that. But like about 5 years ago, I made a band called Bull Dust. And myself and 3 guys in Mount Isa. And our musical thing is 70s, 80s hard rock. Like it's just, I don't know. And country music and also a bit of pop as well with our own spin. So it's polar opposite for me. Like there's heaps I've been influenced by, and I really love musical theatre and cabaret. So
interesting. You're very well-rounded. That's what I'm getting from this, from your, all the names that you've dropped, is that you have a good sort of understanding of what quality music is like. Not that Backstreet Boys isn't quality, it is. It's they have great harmonies and, all that. But when you're dealing with, some of the classic artists, and when you're dealing with songwriters like Dolly Parton, there's a certain class there also,
There is, and I think a lot of people underestimate Dolly Parton as a songwriter and even as a performer. Like she's written thousands and thousands of songs, and just her storytelling ability, it's just amazing.
Why is music so important to you? It sounds like, when you were talking, that it's really, and I can see, that you have this glow about you when you talk about it, that there's this connection to family and this connection to community and a connection to, almost yourself. And you were talking about it being a way of life. Are those some of the reasons why they're important, why it's important to you? Or do you have other things about music that, just drives you?
I think, wow, that's a really powerful question. I'm getting a little bit teary. I think it's so important to me because it represents, times, spaces and places in my life. I will always cry about Dolly Parton and her singing Coat of Many Colours. Like, that's just because it's about my mum. Like, it's about this story that I have with my mum and her, you know, teaching me to sing. There you go. I've lost it.
All good. All good.
And Status Quo, two guys from the UK played guitars, and I remember my dad showing me a video of them playing. So that's, you know, a really powerful thing. You know, it's going to concerts. Like, I went to the Rolling Stones concert in Adelaide with my dad. So that was a thing that we shared. Yeah, it's just all the happy memories of, I guess, traveling around Outback, Mount Isa, when we used to be heavily involved in the country music club. I don't know. Does that make sense?
You know, it makes perfect sense. And my mom, she already has all the songs we're supposed to play at her funeral. You know, she's got them chosen.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
In a really good way, without sounding morbid.
No, but and when you were sharing that story, I got full on goosebumps, because there are so many songs that I've heard myself, and much like you, my family doesn't live where I live, and that's tough. And, you know, Jackson Browne will come on the radio, and I'll think of my mom, and isn't he the best?
He's the and
you know, these other songs come on, and I will be, you know, I'll be reminded of my family. You know, my dad used to play Nina Simone all the time, and I remember when I was a teenager, I just didn't get it, and I'm sorry to say, but I didn't get it, so I didn't want to listen to it. And then there was this moment, I don't know if I grew up or what happened, but I realized the power of, you know, Nina Simone. And I think one of the amazing things about music is exactly what you said, is our connection to the songs, but to the people who have shown us, you know, introduced us to them. And I think that, you know, those people will always live on in those songs for us, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, I got to see Dolly Parton with my mum. I got to go to her concert in Brisbane. As a family, we flew to Brisbane again to see the Eagles, because that was something that we used to listen to when we were little.
Great.
Yeah, so all of these, you know, bands and stuff and music and artists, it's just, I think time, spaces and places in your life that it represents. Yeah.
One of the things for me about music as well is the power that, you know, that the stories, like you talked about, you know, with Dolly Parton and her ability to tell story, you know, and, you know, how many people have had to go through heartbreak to give us some of the best songs of all time. And I guess where I'm going with that is, you know, these artists and their ability to be able to channel what they're feeling into words. And so, you know, I could talk to you about music, I'm sure, for the next 5 hours, but I do want to get into the subject now of, you know, your creative life coaching business, because when I think about the power of story and creativity and channeling the messages within us, that's kind of what I would imagine a life coach or a creative life coach to do. Is that sort of how you see your role, or what do you do as a creative life coach?
I think relating it back to music, songwriting, specifically storytelling, like, we all have stories with us, in us, around us. I think too, you know, it's up to the individual to really listen to those stories, particularly like in Aboriginal families. You know, our culture is storytelling. It's passed down generation to generation. It's telling stories to teach you lessons life lessons. It's telling stories to help you become, the person that you're supposed to be. It's, teaching you good lessons, walking the path as a good ancestor. So I think with, creative life coaching and songwriting and telling your stories and narrative, it's such a healing and powerful thing. Like it's kind of up to you really, if how deep and how vulnerable you want to go, and if you're willing to share. And that's what songs are. I think that's what music is. Everyone has experienced heartbreak, the loss of love. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You remember your heart being broken. And it's, at the time there was nothing in the world that could put it back together. So people channel that in, I guess, creative ways. And here we've got millions and millions of songs now. So,
and I guess if they don't channel it in creative ways, it stays stuck within them. And and then that ain't good.
No, and I think you kind of need to, it's free therapy, really.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, if you think that, creativity and writing music and, if that's a form of therapy. But yeah.
Oh, absolutely it is. It's, I've always wanted to do something, and I'm working on it now, like gathering women's stories, sitting around gathering women's stories, their life, looking at what's been, happening for them, where would they like to go, like all of those kinds of, life altering questions, and helping them turn it into a song, helping them through their healing, with their, with their journey of healing. So I guess, it's how much you want to share and how willing you're, how open and vulnerable you want to be.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you write music, you don't need to share it right away as well, because I know that I've written songs before, and one time I couldn't sing it through. I was told that maybe I should sit on that for a while.
Exactly.
Do you think that
if I kind of fit?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, just getting back to that, I think, sometimes you feel a little bit embarrassed that was going on in your head, and did I really think about that and say that out loud?
But it's sort of a no judgment zone, especially when you feel empowered to be vulnerable with the pen and paper, kind of quieting that voice in yourself that's, trying to tell you that line is not very good, or for you to be writing that down.
Yeah, or, it's like journaling without editing, just letting it all flow out and get out of you, and then revisiting it later, trying to make sense of those thoughts.
Do you think that everyone has it in them to be creative? And as a creative life coach, do you focus primarily on music and storytelling?
At this moment, yes. But, there's other ways to release your creative energy, share your creative and artistic talents. There's art journaling, there's painting, there's sculpting, there's photography, there's all those things. And I think people do have the chance to be creative. I think, as a person who's not in the box, thinks outside the square, artists, musicians, creatives, I think we have that innate ability to, look at the world through a different lens, and sort of find solutions, creative solutions to problems that, normal people would go, oh, no, sorry, that doesn't work. So Yeah.
Do you think if somebody, at home is listening and they're thinking that they really want to be more creative, they really want to, be vulnerable and try different forms of expressing themselves, but they think that they don't have an ability to do that? Do you think that's just a mindset to get over? Do you think that there are some people that aren't creative?
I think for our listeners out there that it's a mindset thing. Um, it's a self-confidence thing. It's a belief thing. Look at the age that we live in, the power of the internet, right? Social media. Um, get on and start a YouTube blog. Start writing. Start sharing your stories. Start sharing your photos. Because someone out there is going to be attracted to you and what your values are and what your beliefs are. Someone is always going to be there and will want to follow you. And like, I always think of that saying, and you never know who's watching you.
That's terrifying.
Who's looking at you, like, yeah, like a stalking way. Sorry, but like
in a non-stalking way.
Stalking way. But you don't know who's like out there seeing what you're doing.
Yeah, and connecting to it. And I think that, maybe if you lose the expectation for how you think something's supposed to go. I think one of the things that I see people struggling with, people that I work with or that I know, it's about that they're worried about being judged, or they're worried about, other people valuing their work. And I think that, exactly what you said, that getting out there and just doing it and not being concerned about whether or not people are going to like it or not like it, that chances are there's always going to be somebody that's digging what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think too, like performance wise and creating wise and, artistically speaking, you grow as a performer, as a singer, as a creative. Like I know in the last 5 years, in terms of my ability to perform and sell a story, it's so much better than what I was at a younger age, because I've had the life experience. I've had, I've been mentored by some of the world's best. Like, these people are just my awesome friends, and I can call on them anytime to ask about, things and where I need help. And I think, I'm 36 now, and I like look back, not that I'm old, but like I look back and you think, like this amazing life. Like, 19, I met people from Queensland Music Festival, and I've had like nearly a 20-year, I feel like it's, 15 years or something with the Queensland Music Festival, and I still get to call these people my mentors and absolute friends. I performed at Brisbane Cabaret Festival when I was young. I've done heaps of shows. I started writing my own show. And from that led to other things. So it's just, I think, it comes back to success too, and your definition of success.
Yeah, and I think that what you're saying there is that you're constantly improving, and building on that. What is your own show going to be about, the one that you're writing?
So I started in 2003, I started the creative development process, which is a long journey. It's not overnight.
No, it doesn't seem to be.
I can tell you that now. People seem to think, oh, wow, be famous soon. No, it doesn't happen
overnight
that way.
Success 17 years later.
Yeah. So 2003, I started working with a team of other artists and creatives, and they were really interested in my background, my musical background, and also my family background, because I identify as Aboriginal, very strong in my culture. I acknowledge my Russian, Irish, Javanese, Scottish ancestry too, German ancestry as well. But like I started telling them a story about my great grandmother. So she was an Aboriginal lady. She had an Aboriginal mother and a Russian father. And his family came over here from Russia at, early 1900s and settled up on the Atherton Tablelands near Malanda. Met my great grandmother, and they had a family. And, during that time, it was illegal for Aboriginal people to be with non-Indigenous people. And, they fought the law, they fought authorities, and, they won. So, and I started, I guess my story then, it was called Little Beerung. So that's my great grandmother's traditional name. I'm not sure what it means. Nobody knows what it means. Unfortunately, Granny couldn't remember at the time. So this story was about the women in my family. So I went back to great Granny and, started asking questions about, how she grew up and who her mum was and what happened to her dad, and, all these little things that kids, I'm not sure if kids today ask these questions. They should. They should, because it's their history. Yeah. But, I talked to Granny about, her time as a woman in the early part of Australia's history, raising a family, raising an Indigenous family underneath, a terrible legislation, a government legislation. Mm-hmm. And then, I looked at my grandmother's life, and then I went to my mum's life, and I've sort of come to me. So I used all of their stories and I set it to song. So
wow,
that took a while.
Wow. So
yeah.
Did that go anywhere? Did you perform that?
Yeah. So 2010, it premiered at the Duke Theatre in Cairns as part of Kaif. Then it had a rewrite. That's pretty important to, I think, let listeners know out there, the creative process about rewriting and getting the audience feedback and seeing how the story moves and if it made sense to, the punters. So it had a rewrite, and then it was at the Judith Wright Centre in 2011. And then I did like a little art tour performing in northwest Queensland. So I went to little remote communities, Camberwell, Burketown, Normanton, Croydon, Cairns, and finished off in Mackay. So I kind of toured that and put my heart and soul into that, and then that kind of got me to the Sapphires gig. So I was in the Sapphires.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I went over to London with Casey Donovan, Ari Pigram, and Lisa Mazza. So we were over there for a bit, and then I came back and I was like, oh, what do I do with my life now? Because, this massive big high, and then I finished. And then 2015, I got into a musical theatre production with Queensland Theatre Company. It was like a fictionalised tale of an Aboriginal country performer, Jimmy Little. So I played the part of a lady called Oriel Andrew, and she's actually from Mount Isa. So she was an Indigenous woman country singer back in the day. She loved singing and performing too. That's all she wanted to do with her life. So I kind of, found a person who was like me, and very fortunate that she did come and watch the show, and she loved it. She absolutely loved it, and gave me her blessing. I was the only person that was to play her if it was to go any further around Australia. So, I've just done my thing.
I love it. I think that a lot about, not knowing, obviously your full story, you're really summing it up. but it's a lot about flow, isn't it? And following your heart
Mm,
and opportunities presenting themselves to you with the more authentic you are.
mm. I think too, being like defining success and what it means to you, and also, people have come to me and said, "Why don't you be famous? And why aren't you on The Voice? And why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that?" And it's like, no, that's not me. That's
Mhm.
not who I am. It's not. Doesn't motivate me to sell millions of records. It just I just want to be happy, and I've done all these
Yeah.
things, and I've made a good little career out of it. It's sort of, self-managed freelance artistry career.
Can I go back to something you talked about earlier where you were talking about how you were rewriting? And I wanted to
Hmm.
ask you a little bit about how you decide which feedback to take on board.
I believe at the time, from what I can remember, so we we presented the work, um, and I performed it, and we all thought it was great. The creative team all thought it was good because we were in the
Yeah.
story. We knew how it flowed. We knew what was coming
Yeah.
next.
Too close to it
Um,
almost. Yeah.
yeah. So when you do perform it to an audience that is not the creative team, I think you've got to be really, big shoulders, but it's also constructive feedback and criticism. It's about presenting the work, logical flow, logical steps, and sort of staying true to the creative and artistic vision. So I think it's about um, taking on board that feedback, looking at how it can be better written,
Mm.
rewrite, um, and making it very clear and succinct.
Hmm.
So
So it's
yeah,
sort of, understanding what your goal is or your mission, and then hearing the feedback and then discerning whether or not that's helping you build your story or not, kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's working with the composer to sort of say, love this song, but could we try it this way? Or this is what I really want to say. How do you feel about um, rewriting this lyric?
Right.
Working with the director. I really feel at this, at this time I should be over here, doing this part, standing this way, delivering it this way. It's a give and take. As much as it's my story, and that's never any doubt. It's sort of, working with the creative team
Mm.
for the best possible
Right.
outcome.
Like
Yeah,
releasing the work and letting it grow as its own piece in a way.
yeah. So coming like to 2020, if I did perform this show again, there would be definitely another rewrite because my great grandmother has passed away, and also there's cultural considerations and elements, protocols that I would have to follow within my family, and talking
Oh,
to
right.
my grandma, like her daughter.
Okay.
There's also me as a person, because when I first performed that show, I was young, like I was 20 something, and now 10 years later, there's a lot of things have happened. Like you
Yeah.
grow as a woman, and also as a creative professional. So there's those elements to think of as
Hmm.
well.
I love that. I
Hmm.
think that, one of the reasons why people are afraid of being vulnerable or creating work, that others are going to see, or just even getting real with how they feel about themselves is, self-doubt and a bit of that imposter syndrome. I know that those are things that you help people work on. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Self-doubt, you know what, I've yet to see or talk to anyone who hasn't experienced
Yeah.
that, no matter what area or field you're in. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I've had those times myself, self-doubt, imposter syndrome.
Me too.
Like many a times, like anyone has them. And it's just, I don't know, somewhere in your little head, you just have to get over the hurdle, and like you realize that where you are and where you need to be, that space is like nothing. So what are you really afraid of? Like, can you see my hand movements?
I can see. So she's got one hand close and she's moving the other hand further away from it.
but I hope that makes sense. Like, it's just.
Well, so are you saying that, you know, these are things that are just in our mind? And so how do you move on from it though? Because, you know, okay, so for me, right, I've been, you know, working on myself for a long time, you know, years, you know, a long time. And even I've been dealing with, you know, imposter syndrome. It took me an entire year to do my first Facebook Live, which I did a couple months ago. And, you know, and
I'm the same.
And it's so funny because for so long I was talking myself out of it. And then one day I just realized that the person I want to be needs to do Facebook Lives on the regular. So I just started acting like the person that I want to be and doing it. So for you, I mean, how have you worked through the imposter syndrome or the self-doubt, or how have you coached other people to do that for themselves?
I think for myself, and also if I could give anyone some advice or tips to our listeners out there, I think it's a good grounding. Like, you know, I know it sounds silly and ridiculous, but like you really have to believe in yourself. Like you really have to dig deep. You've got to remember that you've been put on this earth for a reason, and you've been given the gifts that you have been given. And it's not just, hey, here they are. Like this is you. Like this makes you.
Yeah.
This is what your purpose is. You know, find out what your purpose is. Do the inner work. Like check in with yourself. You know, for me, whenever I kind of doubt myself musically, personally, I go back to my culture and what I've been taught from my family. Like I know my family stories. I know where I've come from. I know, you know, people, the groups. I know where my land is. I know who my family are. I know, you know, that music is important to me. I try to remember those things before I do a performance, before I do a talk about anything. Before, you know, if I get really nervous or get very anxious, you just have to work out ways of how to kind of work through that, I suppose.
And that's by doing it, isn't it?
yeah you just have to do it. And you know what, like I've gone on stage and in plays I've lost my line, I've cracked myself up. In my band, we had the best time in my band, because, you know, I'll sing the wrong words or I'll forget words and no one really cares. Like I'll just make a joke out of it. You know, the drummer will give me a bit of cheek, the guitarist will give me cheek. Like it's just all tongue in cheek, really. And, you know, you can't take yourself too seriously. There's just in any profession. It's just, I think humor gets you by too. Having a good sense of humor gets you by.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, you know, one thing that I thought of when you were talking was that you don't need to be perfect, because if someone like yourself who's had such a successful career and like done all these different things, if you still acknowledge and recognize that you're improving all the time, then that means that you were never perfect and you aren't now.
That's right.
You know, I think that sometimes gets in the way of people taking a risk. Do you think so? That they just want to get it perfect, but that's not a real thing?
No, and I don't think art shouldn't be like that. It's not. you know, art can be creative and messy and all over the shop, and it's you. And if you're creative, messy, embrace that, I think, and
Yeah.
go with the flow. And, you know, if I would have told myself that when I was younger, like,
Yeah.
you know, I wouldn't have had some of the the little mini meltdowns that one
Yeah.
does. I'm sure our listeners out there can relate to
Yeah.
that.
100%.
But it's, yeah.
I think too, you know, not comparing yourself to other people. Would you think that that's also important?
I think you are you, and that's all that matters. There's only one of you,
Yeah.
and it's you and your gifts. And, you know, it's good to stick together and admire what people do. But yeah, comparing yourself, I think that's when it becomes a little bit tricky.
One of the best books I ever read, I don't know if you read this book, but it's called The Four Agreements. Have you heard of it?
Ah,
It's really good. It's
right.
by this guy named Don Ruiz Miguel, and he basically talks about how if you live by these four agreements, you'll have the best life possible.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the agreements is don't take things personally, because you were born at a different time in a different place to a different family than I was. So we're already not the same.
Exactly.
So your opinion, although I might respect it, it doesn't, I don't need it to value who I am, you know, and that's kind of what I hear you saying as well, that when you know your own story, that needs to be enough for you also.
I think so too. Yep.
Yeah.
Knowing your story is everything. It's who you are, where you come from, where you need to go, like what's
Yeah.
next for me. So, and I think if you grab onto that, that's a really powerful thing. So
Yeah, I agree. One of the things you help people with is you help them to develop and create a vision
yeah,
and bring their ideas to life. How do you sort of work that process in when you're working with somebody?
I think it's allowing yourself to just dream big. Like people say that all the time, but it's allowing, like, okay, what are the important things that I really want to say? What means so much to me that I need to get this out of me onto paper, onto canvas, onto print, whatever. You know, having a creative visualization process. Like
Yeah,
I love vision boards.
me too.
Like a, you know, people are sort of, oh, you know, vision boards.
I love it.
But
Yeah.
I think, like, if it's in front of you, like
Yeah.
you feel it, you taste it, you smell it, you see it, it's there, and you're like, yep, I'm gonna go for it. I remember being at my mum's work. She still works in a school, and I saw at the time there was a magazine out called Deadly Vibe, and it was an Indigenous publication. It looked at, you know, what artists were doing, what singers were doing, what Indigenous people were doing in the arts industries, whatever. And I saw a picture of the Sapphires production then. So there was prior to the Sapphires production that I was in, there was the very first one that came out early 2000s or late 90s. You know, I was in high school at the time and I didn't think anything of it. I just said, oh, I'm going to be in that one day. And Mum's like, oh yeah, sure. I said, no, I am. Like, she wasn't, you know, having a go at me.
Yeah, no,
she's
but
like, she's like, okay, Megan. I said, and the other thing is, sure, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And, you know, I did it. I got there in the end. Like, it was just, I don't know. Somehow I just, you know, charted the course. I took things which led on to other things, which kind of led me to my goal. So it's a journey if you're willing to ride the waves, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that being creative is important to, you know, sort of be a more productive human in general, you know, to release those emotions or to release those thoughts so that they're not inside you, for example?
Yes. Yep. I think it's overall so beneficial to your mental health and well-being. It's helps you relate to people. It helps you think about things differently. It helps you approach situations differently. It helps you think through, concepts, ideas, situations. I think it's everything. I think it's just, I don't know. That's how my little brain works. I'm not sure. you know,
Mm.
I guess our listeners out there, creative artists, whoever, like,
Mm-hmm.
I guess they would be feeling the same things. They could, yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of our listeners are also business people who might be wanting to get a bit more creative, which could then translate into helping them have even a more successful business. So, do you have any strategies or any tips or tricks that people can maybe implement to sort of get started on their creative journey? I mean, you did talk about creating a vision board. Do you have some other ideas that could maybe get the creative juices flowing, so to speak?
Journaling is pretty good. Journal prompts, mindset, thinking about where you want to go, what you want to achieve in any aspect of life, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's having a goal and sticking to it. I think, biting the chunks a little bit at a time. So what's important now? What can you do now to get you there? Short-term goals, long-term goals. It's dedication. It's having a plan, like having a mind map. Mind maps are pretty good. Brainstorming sessions.
I think that, it's funny because when you were talking, I think when you're a creative person, naturally, you take it for granted in a way that
Yes.
that it comes
Yes.
easier, because this probably is going to sound ridiculous, but I never really thought about goal setting as being creative, but it's obviously creative, and dreaming is obviously creative. So, if somebody at home is thinking, I'm not creative, well, if you have ever thought about where you want to go and grow, you're using your imagination. That's creativity. Bam, you've done it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It's your dreams. Like it's
Yeah.
if you want to travel the world and be a photographer doing it, like you think about, okay, I'll do this, I'll start saving money, and you have a little process, you have a little plan to get you to that end goal. So I think everyone's creative. I think they just have to use it, tap into it, try it.
One thing that I hear, people sort of get concerned or freaked out about, or I think almost put too much pressure on themselves, is in terms of the word passion. Where I've heard people go, oh, I don't know what my passion is, or I don't have a passion. I mean, do you think that you need to be passionate about something to be creative, or does the word passion even matter?
I think if you find something that you love and that you can't live without, and if it, you know, sets your heart aflutter, if it just totally immerses your well-being, you are pretty passionate, and you will follow it to the ends of the earth. That's something I can't for me, I can't really articulate
Mm-hmm.
that. But I think, you know, you find something that you love doing and worth doing, you'll never have to work in inverted commas a day in your whole life, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it won't be seen as a chore. It won't be seen as, oh, I've got to get up and do it.
Yeah.
It's something that you just, yeah, I love this, I'm going to dedicate and devote my whole life to it.
Yeah.
And I think you will feel that. You will innately feel that.
And if you don't, I guess try something new. Or,
Yeah.
I guess you can also just like something. You don't have to want to do it as a career for it to still be helpful and good for you.
It can be a hobby that could turn into a side hustle.
Yeah.
It could turn into a big thing, but it could be your hobby, but it gives you joy. It gives you
Yeah.
pleasure. It helps you just sort of think about nothing for the next hour or so, if that's what you need and that's your de-stress. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I have some of those adult coloring books.
Yes,
Have you ever used those?
I have. Yeah, I
They're
have.
lovely. They're
I
lovely.
love
It's
them.
just when you were talking about, how sometimes you just kind of, let empty out your mind in a way. And, coloring sometimes is actually lovely for that. It doesn't take much energy at all, except for figuring out what color to go wear, and it doesn't matter.
Exactly, exactly. Like I remember one afternoon a couple of weeks ago, I was like, just get on YouTube, find out how to draw David Bowie. And I found this YouTube video. I was like, okay. Just sat there and sort of did my own thing. And like, it
That's
turned out
wonderful.
okay. I'm not Picasso, but like, before I knew it, I spent like 4 hours just finding a
Wow.
YouTube video of learning how to draw David Bowie,
It's
a
so
lady in a
funny.
dress with a hat. Like it was just, and my partner's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Just drawing." And he's
Did you
like, "I didn't know."
actually choose David Bowie, or did you just come across a YouTube video that taught you how to draw him?
Look, I love David Bowie. I saw him in concert, and I was like, I'm just going to draw David Bowie. And it was like just draw Ziggy Stardust or something.
Yeah.
But like,
Oh, actually, because then you've got the cool face paint, and yeah, I get that. That would be okay. Fair enough.
but like I was lost in myself for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
Before I knew it, it was tea time. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And
Yeah.
I'm not drawing stick figures. If I kept this up, like I'm actually okay at it. So
Wow.
yeah.
I would not be okay. I am the worst artist, artist in that way. And I'm not having this self-doubt or imposter syndrome. I'm having a total self-awareness moment that I just know that just saying, also being aware of your strengths is also a really good quality when you're developing your creativity. Yeah. So I know one of the things that you do, Megan, as well, is you do coaching packages, and I'll leave a link for that in the show notes.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask you a couple of sort of random questions at the end, but I wanted to make sure, was there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to, bring up or talk a bit further on?
I just think for our listeners out there, if you find something you've got a passion, try it, stick with it, give it a go. Don't be scared. Like, take the jump. If you want to write a song, learn to do it. If you want to learn to sing, try it out. If you want to learn to dance, it's just, I think in my life and the way I was brought up and how everyone sort of, give it a go. Just give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? And just, if you love it, good on you. So I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that your life is more enriched because you've been able to have a creative outlet?
Definitely. Like I just, music, the arts, performing, attending concerts, being part of concerts, going to theatre, talking to like-minded people and peers about, the arts, performance. You get into political discussions, you're talking about things that are just, I guess flowing through you. You want to kind of make the world a better place. You want to investigate things for yourself. You want to learn more. You want to grow more as a person. You want to, you don't want to go off just what one person has told you. It's, developing the critical thinking. It's just, yeah.
One of the things, that you said as well is, or what struck me, I guess, is that when you're being creative, is that you're actually spending time with yourself. And I think that a lot of people tend to avoid that.
Yeah.
A fair amount of people, yeah.
Yeah, being alone with yourself is good. Like spending that time diving into the process, trying things, not worrying about what anyone, is thinking about you. It's just, yeah, it's good time. It's like self-care for you.
Yeah. So, you know, what do you like to do with your free time besides to draw pictures of David Bowie? And
Really bad pictures of David Bowie. No.
well, I don't know. You seem very confident that you might have a career there.
Oh, no, not really. It was great, but it's not that great. What do I like to do? Play guitar. Play guitar is pretty cool. Love guitar. I love reading, spending time with my family, being outside, nature.
Yeah.
Love animals. There's lots of things I like to do. Much to I think my family would laugh at this, but like I've found cooking. I actually enjoy cooking.
Yeah. Is that not a normal thing in your family?
No, it's not a normal thing for me. My family would laugh at that, but I'm actually really good at it. So I haven't killed anyone yet.
Still early days. What's
Yeah,
your favorite thing to
early.
cook so far?
I love a good roast.
Yeah.
Good risotto.
Mm.
Yeah.
So if you could go out to dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh, David Bowie, definitely.
Mm. What would you ask him? What's one question you would want to know from him?
What was fame really like for you? Because I've heard that he just didn't like it. Like it changed everything for him. I would love to have dinner with the Queen, only because I admire her leadership.
What part about it?
Well, she's neutral. Like she's not seen to be, like she's not seen to be getting into, political debates or anything. And how has she been a strong woman when there has been men all around her making silly decisions? But she's supposed, like, I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah, no,
to the men out there, but like,
especially her age, considering when she became queen, she would have been dealing with a totally different generation than now, for example.
Exactly, and all the things that she's lived through, like the wars, the world wars. She's seen heaps of presidents, been witness to their terms, here in Australia, prime ministers.
So just before we wrap up, I do love to know when from my guests, what one of their favorite books are, because I'm a voracious reader. So do you have one that you want to mention?
I really love Women Who Run with Wolves.
That's so funny. I bought that probably 15 years ago, and I don't think I ever read it. Yeah, I'll write it down.
Just diving in deep to that one, and also I don't mind The Body Keeps the Score. So it's about how our bodies are affected by trauma, and it's not just PTSD and how that affects everyone, and trauma and how we carry it and how it impacts on us. So I like those kinds of books.
Creativity can help with trauma as well.
Absolutely. Free therapy. It's it's a release. It's really diving in deep to do the inner work and to work out who you are, and having a good look at yourself and where I've come from and where do I need to go. So yeah,
I love that. Well, thank you so much for such an interesting and valuable and fun conversation today, Megan. I really appreciate it, and it's been great getting to know you.
No problem. Thank you. It's lovely to talk to you too.
So I'll put a link to your socials, some of your YouTubes. I hope you'll share with me, and I will find out for our listener at home where she got that YouTube video on how to draw David Bowie. So you too can do that. And I'll also put a link to your websites as well. So if people do want to get involved in any coaching with you, that they have direct access to that.
No problem.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please do leave us a review where you listen to your podcast and share it with your friends. New episodes every Monday.